part of our job is to make sure that people know that this is working, right? They need to see the jobs, they need to see the investment, they need to see the deployment. And so we call it winning the win, right? We got to win the win. We got to we had this huge transformational piece of legislation, but if that's the only conversation we're having, we've lost.
This is the Solar Disruption Theory.
Welcome back to another episode of the Solar Disruption Theory podcast. My name is Chad Towner. With us, we've got the CEO of Freedom Forever, Brett Bushy. And so far this season, we've brought in different thought leaders and leaders in the solar industry. And today is no exception. We've got the CEO of the Solar Energy Industry Association, SEIA, the CEO and president, Abby Hopper, as well as the SVP of Supply Chain and Sustainability, John Smirnow. Thank you guys for coming. How you doing?
We're great. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
You guys have actually been working on the Inflation Reduction Act, right? You guys have been working on that for several years.
Right.
And I want to get into all of how that happened. It's such a huge piece of news and development for the solar industry in general. You know, so we on our side are just couldn't be more excited about it. And first and foremost, we wanted to thank you guys for all of the work that you guys do. Typically, our audience isn't privy to a lot of the conversations that you guys are involved in. You know, I bet the majority of our audience has not set foot in the White House, for example. And you guys, you know, that's a regular occurrence for you. So I can't wait to dig in and figure out how this whole thing came to be. The Inflation Reduction Act really is a monumental improvement, and it's just one of the most exciting things that's happened in my 10 years of being in the solar industry. Mm-hmm. So we thought that to start off this episode, it would be appropriate to celebrate the fact that you guys got that done and to thank you. And so what we've done is we brought here a bottle of champagne.
Oh my goodness.
Figured we might want to celebrate on air. Woohoo! And if you're not drinkers, I also have a non-alcoholic version. And we figured we might want to have a toast. What do you think about that?
Let's do it. I love it. There's a lot to celebrate.
I agree.
So much.
This was Brett's idea, by the way.
Congratulations.
Why, thank you. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
And I'm only doing this because I'm excited that this has got to be the first time that Chad has opened up a bottle of champagne his entire life. He doesn't drink. All right. And I just wanted to see him do it. Like, can he do it?
Can he do it?
I'm not sure if he can. And if he does do it, is he going to take any,
yeah,
take
can we just
out?
Is there eyewear here?
I've got glasses. All right. I'm good.
I asked him, I'm like, hey, are you going to open this? And he's like, no, you're doing it. You're the host.
Definitely doing it.
And I knew exactly what he was.
Okay.
I'm
Do
like
you know
nervous.
where to point it?
Definitely not.
If you're listening
I'll
to
point
this
it away from
on Spotify, get on YouTube and watch this situation.
I will point this away from. I don't.
Are you going to
Am
point
I
at
at risk
Brett?
right now? I'm pointing it into the back. I'm sorry, guys. I will watch me open this bottle of Martinelli's. I will crack that open in no time.
Wait.
All right.
Okay.
This has not been shaken, has it? You guys shook this, didn't you? Oh.
All right.
Now what do I do? Just pull it off?
I don't know. We're going to see. This is like,
this is amazing.
This is riveting.
Danny would be
I'm going to try twisting.
We're drinking.
Okay, it's coming up.
Ooh.
What do I do?
Yeah, keep doing it. Oh! Woo!
Oh my gosh. That was
I'll pour
awesome.
one for Johnny, and I'll share what you're having.
Do I just pour?
Yeah.
A little more, yeah. A little
more slowly, a little slower.
Oh goodness, slower. Yeah, that's enough. That's enough. Hold on, let's see how it goes.
Okay, pour one for Brett.
Oh goodness gracious!
This is what you guys get. You get the amateur in here, and this is.
Just don't get it on my shoes. I don't know what is more dangerous: swimming with orcas or having you open a bottle of Dom.
Is that enough?
That's enough.
It started
All right. I love it. No, I'll have the other for you with you.
Okay.
I'll share that.
Let's. My hands are all wet.
We have a Dom tradition of celebrating.
We do.
Yes, we do. We have celebrated when we had the 2-year extension.
Yeah.
What was that? The end of 20?
20.
Yeah.
Oh, Abby, you have to have something. My whole scheme was to get you to loosen up, all right, and you really get the inside scoop.
Yeah.
And
we can't do that. Champagne to loosen up.
Sparkling apple cider is not going to do it.
Watch it.
Right?
Just you watch. I will deliver. I promise.
So our head of comms would be like, you're
don't drink and do the interviews.
The sugar hits just as hard. I can promise you that.
Is that why you got the crumble cookies? That's why you got the crumble cookies.
There is a method to everything that we do here
I
at
love
Freedom.
it.
Like it really truly is. But
I love it.
I first of all, I'd love to start by just asking the question is that, and we use a term that I hate in this industry called the solar coaster, but it truly was like, it was so up and down. It looked like it was going to happen. Then it wasn't going to happen. Then it was pretty much dead. And then all of a sudden we wake up, all right, and I get the notices from you guys, everyone like that Manchin agreed to a deal. What happened?
What happened? I will happily tell you. Shall we toast?
Let's toast.
Yes.
Let's toast.
To the Inflation Reduction Act and Abby and John at SEIA.
And
so awesome.
To all of your listeners,
Thank you.
they may have never been in the White House, but I've never been in someone's kitchen trying to sell solar. So we have a lot to learn from each other.
I love that.
Yes. Oh, wait. I forgot to drink. Hold on.
Yes. See, this sugar's already doing its thing, just so you know.
The crumble cookie really got me.
Very tasty.
Very tasty.
Yes.
So everything you said is accurate. It was a ride of a lifetime when the House had passed the Build Back Better bill. Everything we wanted, everything we asked for was in it. There was a 10-year extension of the investment tax credit, which literally came because my Vice President of Congressional Affairs and I, Aaron Duncan and I was supposed to testify before the House Ways and Means Committee, and they wanted to know what we wanted. It was before any legislation had been written, summer of 2021, right after Biden was inaugurated. And Aaron and I were chatting on the phone, right? Because it was still very COVID-y, so we weren't in the same place. And she said, well, why don't we just ask to fill the budget window? Like, let's just ask for a 10-year extension. I mean, the worst they could do is say no. I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So that was it. I've now told you the genesis of the 10-year ITC extension is that Aaron and I were trying to figure out what I would say in front of the House Ways and Means Committee. That was summer of 2021. It got in the bill. It passed out of the House. And I remember where I was. You probably remember where you were. You're like, oh my gosh, this is happening. By the end of 2021, we are going to be like, woo. And then December 21, and Manchin said, I'm not doing it. And what had been sort of this Christmas high, right? Like we're going into the holidays, the new year, this is incredible, came crashing to the ground. And that was a low point. That was the first of many low points, but that was certainly a low point. And then things were quiet in Washington, January and February of 2022. It felt like there was no hope, right? And there was a lot of other stuff was happening. Some trade issues started happening, and we thought, I'm sorry, we have a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic House, and we can't get anything done, and we're getting slammed on trade. What weird universe are we living in? Yeah. And we kept looking at each other like, I thought it was supposed to be better. I thought this was supposed to be better. And then things started moving, and maybe there was some momentum, and we went to events with Senator Manchin, and we went to events with Senator Schumer. Like we did all the things that we do in Washington. And it felt like there was some momentum, and we felt like things were getting better, and we had people coming in and all kinds of lobbying, and then it died again. And I remember where I was. So there was a couple iterations, but it was in July of 2022 when Senator Manchin again said, I think he said it on Fox News or like one of the Sunday morning shows, I'm not voting for this. I do. I remember exactly where I was. I remember what I was wearing. I remember where I was standing because I thought, how is this happening? How is this one human standing in the way of incredible progress and transformation of our economy? And, we had all spent tons of time in West Virginia. We'd all spent tons of time thinking about what he wanted, what was important to him, how we could be helpful to his state. And then I had a talk with my board chair. I was going to go be a barista. He was going to go be a bartender. We were going to forget solar, forget it. It's all over. Like, I'm out of here. And then we got it together. And what was different about that moment in time was that my team decided we're not giving up. I live inside the Beltway. I am a Beltway insider. I've lived there my whole life. I love politics. I love all of that stuff. But most people inside the Beltway said it's over. Like, let's just call it. Let's focus on a 2-year extension, end of year tax extenders. We're not going to fight anymore. It's clear that this thing has died. And my team and I said, this is way too big. We're not ready yet. And so I spent that weekend on the phone calling senators, not the senators whose names were in the newspapers, right? Like, I did not call Senator Manchin. I did not call Senator Schumer. I called senators like Senator Heinrich, Senator Cortez Masto, and others, and said basically, hey, we need an adult in the room. Like, we need someone who has not backed himself into a corner. We need someone who is a bit more less emotionally invested in this process and perhaps has a clear head. And so we did that, and we said, we need you to fight. Like, this can't be over. There's way too much on the line. And then we did something else, which you may think is a little odd, sort of given your business model, but it was highly effective. And that is, for the first time ever, SEIA and the IBEW wrote a letter together and said to Senator Manchin, you need to pass it was still called the Build Back Better bill, right? This is too impactful. There are too many jobs, too much capital deployment, too many opportunities to be left standing on the sidelines. Lonnie Stevenson, who was the president of the National IBEW, called Senator Manchin. We did tons of outreach, and it was all quiet. And then, again, I remember exactly where I was when the first words hit that a deal had been cut. It was, as we know, it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, not the Build Back Better Act. We can call it whatever we want. But it had almost everything we wanted. And it was an incredible moment. I was on vacation with my family. Like, my entire family takes we've been doing it since I was born. Like, all my cousins, all my aunts and uncles, it was my grandparents, but obviously they've all passed away now, all my children and all their cousins. So there's like 40 plus of us. So we're all on vacation together, and this thing dropped. And I had to I was like, kids, mommy's on vacation, but I gotta work. And they were like, mommy, you always work. But I think they get it now, like why this one was particularly noteworthy. I can talk a lot more, but you should talk a little bit about the manufacturing piece, because that had its own kind of ebb and flow, which I think is really impactful. Or we could wait.
And I do want to talk about that. But
Yeah.
I mean, was there any signs beforehand? Because I watched the same thing with Manchin, and I'm like, I believed him.
Yeah.
Like, when you look at his history, when he says something, it's definitive, and he doesn't really change like most politicians do. So I kind of was thinking it was dead.
Right.
But was there any inkling that you knew 24 hours that it was going on? Because it seems like there was 3 people. No one really knows that I've talked to really how it happened. Yeah. When you read the document, it's obvious that there's been some cut and pasting on documents. It's put together haphazardly, which means it probably did happen in the middle of the night. No offense to the document. And it's stunning how it happened. Not that it did happen. That is the way. Has anyone given you any insight, where they had a bar at 11 o'clock at night and, what happened?
I have not heard that. That is a very well-kept secret in Washington. There are a very few number of people that know. There were some inklings that things were happening, right? Like, things around direct pay, where we were having very, very detailed conversation around direct pay and what that might look like. Same on the domestic content, like what percentages might work. So it was much, 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 much more detailed than simply 10-year yes, 10-year no, right? It was like, let's talk about the actual words on the piece of paper. But those final comings together, great, great secret.
All right, so I want to hear about the manufacturing. I am fascinated by it. We have outlined a business strategy that I never dreamed we would be doing because of the Inflation Reduction Act. But one question I want to ask you is how did it get so heavily weighted from a positive standpoint for PPAs versus individuals? Like, we talk about all the stackable credits that you could have, but why did they end up going to corporations or PPAs versus individuals?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's something that SEIA fought. We fought hard and long and very passionately for individual consumers. And the things that are in there were almost not in there. Like, by the skin of their teeth, they got in there. So the 10-year extension for 25D is in there. And I will tell you, from I was going to say, from my perspective, it's based on conversations with legislators and staff and IRS staff. It's like not just something Abby thought up in her bedroom, but based on those conversations, there is a pretty institutional distrust of consumers. That there's a lot of concern about fraud and abuse, that there's a worry that individual consumers will take advantage of direct pay, for example, that did not, even though we made the arguments very strongly that it was actually a tool to bring a more equitable outcome to residential solar deployment, that there's a lot of concern about how we would track that and make sure that individuals were not taking advantage of the system, that there is historically kind of in the DNA of the IRS, there's a much more of a comfort level with corporations, right? And that the two tax provisions, as you know, 48 and 25, which are, the commercial and the residential, they have different histories in the tax code. And so even though you and I don't know what you think, I sort of see them as, one's for business, one's for individuals. Those that live in the tax world don't see them as sort of as like brother and sister. They see them as like distant cousins. And so there's sort of not a sense that they should be treated similarly. Those are the kind of conversations we were having with IRS staff, with committee staff, with legislators, which was, we're really not comfortable with giving individuals. There was a lot of conversation around, well, can we means test it, right? Can we make sure that 25D, perhaps direct pay, is only available to people below a certain income level, below a certain credit score in particular areas of the country? And they just decided, right, that just wasn't workable, that was not something there was political appetite for. So that's what I know.
And what's great about it is that I don't think they intended, but there is, and for the listeners that, don't truly grasp what these stackable credits are, is that a customer an individual can benefit through the form of a PPA. The PPA is the owner of the system, so those corporations are benefiting from that. And those corporations that sell PPAs like Sunrun and Sonova, they're going to pass a lot of that or most of that down to the consumer. So there is some benefits to the individual consumers. That's the first thing we need to educate the public about, that they can take advantage of these stackable credits, but only through a PPA.
Right.
So, and I'd love to just kind of break down, and this might be a question for you, John, like, what are those stackable credits? Could you break down each one of them and explain them to our listeners?
Yeah. So the one that I focus on day to day is the domestic content piece. So that's 10% on top of the existing 30% credit.
So 10% of what?
Yeah, of the total cost of the system.
So if the system cost was
the
$45,000 for the system cost, what would the credit be?
Yeah, it would be 10% of
$4,500.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. In some instances, that is a refundable credit. So for nonprofits, they would be able to get a direct refund from that. Others are going to have to, through their annual filing. There are also lower income communities that Abby can speak to that are on top of that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of other, it's funny, usually it's $45,000. Everything in my math is like, okay, so it costs $100. And then 10% of that is $10. So that as John said, there's a 10% domestic content adder. There's also a 10% adder for what is called energy communities. And so let me just take a little side tangent. So most people probably know, or if they don't know, they think about it. The United States government has historically used the tax code to incent behavior that it wants to see. So if you think about home ownership, right? Probably most people who are listening to this podcast either own a home, their parents owned a home, they might hope to own a home at some point. And one of the benefits of owning a home is that your mortgage payment, and there are parts of it that are deductible on your tax. So that's a way that the government incents home ownership.
Yeah.
This is one of the first times in which the tax code has been used to incent behavior in the clean energy industry, right? So the adders really incent particular kinds of behavior. So they're incenting domestic manufacturing through that 10% adder. They're incenting developing projects in what are called energy communities. So those are communities, they're defined a couple of different ways. Some of them are areas in which there's a coal plant. One criteria has to do with the unemployment rates in that community. So if the unemployment rates are high, one has to do with sort of the tax revenue and whether a fair amount of the tax revenue comes from fossil fuel generation. So they're clearly trying to address this notion that clean energy is leaving sort of traditional fossil fuel communities behind. And in order to address that, they're incented to build or, create solar projects in areas that are traditionally fueled by fossil fuel or where the communities are fueled by the fossil industry. There's also a low income, as John said, adder that there's a cap on it. So this is the only one of them that has a cap, but it is for other kinds of communities that are historically lower income. All of these are, we can talk about sort of the unknowns that still exist in all of this, but those are some of the adders. And it's an interesting way. I mean, you can clearly see the policy objectives of Congress, right? Domestic manufacturing, like fossil communities and low income communities. And it's pretty interesting way to go about it. And we can talk about the base credit on the commercial side as well.
And what is the cap on low income?
So it's 1.8 gigawatts a year. Which I don't know. How do you translate that for listeners?
I think most people that are low income that will fall into that category will be able to get it in 2023.
Yeah, I think they will be able to get it, assuming that the rules come out in a way that we would like them to, right?
Yes, and is that 10% also?
That there's 10% and 20%, and there's we're still waiting for clarification on which adder applies. The 10% or the 20%. We're also waiting for clarification on what if it's residential or community or both. We're waiting for clarity on whether there's going to be a specific delineation, like of that 1.8 gigawatt, for example, 50% is for community solar, 50% is for residential solar. We're waiting for clarification on whether it's a first come, first serve, right? If you're in line the first day, then you get it. And if you don't develop a project until October, you might be out of luck. It could instead be, a quarter of it's released on first quarter, a quarter, second quarter. There's a lot of different ways that will, obviously Freedom Forever is a particularly well-positioned company, right? You have sort of the financial wherewithal and the business sophistication to figure those rules out and move quickly. Perhaps a small sole proprietor may not have as much sophistication and may not be able to navigate some of those. And so it's an interesting conversation. These are the reasons we go into the White House, right? To have these conversations with the White House, with Treasury, with DOE to say, hey, let's think about what are we trying to actually accomplish? And let's make sure the rules that you set out accomplish those goals.
Yeah, and I want to finish this kind of point just to make sure that listeners truly understand the magnitude of this, because I call them stackable credits.
Right.
All right. So I want to make sure that we just do a little math here.
Let's do math.
I love to do math. All right.
Me too.
We got a 30% tax credits.
Ooh.
All right. Then we got 10% for energy communities on top of that, right?
Yeah. Yours are side by side. They should be on top.
On top. Sorry. Okay. All right. We go there. Right, I'm going to run out of hands because there's a lot more coming. All right. And then we also have a low income on top of that. What is the maximum that you can get up to when you add the domestic content and some of the other stuff?
So again, we need clarity from the federal government to ensure that this number is correct, but our basic reading is it could be up to 70%. So that means, on my math, at $100, if your installation costs $100, $70 of that can be a credit against your taxable income.
Yeah, and to put it into terms for our listeners, a $40,000 project, $28,000 there is a credit going to either Sunrun or Sunnova or whoever is doing your PPA.
Right.
All right. Now, that doesn't mean you'll get all that benefit to the customer, but you will get a vast majority of it.
Yeah, you're going to get a big chunk of that. The 1.8 gigawatts, that's a few billion in government expenditures. That's going to drive several $billion in private sector investments just for that alone. If you think of the 30% tax credit, many tens of billions of dollars of private sector investments that's going to drive.
And that doesn't, the 70% doesn't include the tax credit for Enphase, Solar Edge. On top of that, we're not even talking about the manufacturing part yet.
Yeah.
Right.
That's in addition to that.
Or whatever the state incentives might be.
So I want to just make sure that everybody understands what a tremendous opportunity this is in residential solar, but the individual is going to get a huge benefit through the PPAs. We're also going to see a significant swing from purchase to PPAs. And the other thing is, based on energy communities and the math I've done, it literally, I believe almost all of West Virginia is going to be deemed an energy community. That is going to all of a sudden go from a difficult state to make solar work. It's going to open up the entire state.
Yeah.
So because of this, we are going to be opening up probably 3 or 4 branches that we wouldn't have done without it.
Right.
And it's an amazing accomplishment. And I get so excited about it, but I'm just excited about the manufacturing side of it. So I'd love to hear,
Sure.
John, you're the expert. It's part of your title. And so I'd love to hear all the details around manufacturing.
But before we do that, you have to invite us to all of those office openings, because part of our job is to make sure that people, and my people are people who got elected to represent us in Washington, know that this is working, right? They need to see the jobs, they need to see the investment, they need to see the deployment. And so we call it winning the win, right? We got to win the win. We got to we had this huge transformational piece of legislation, but if that's the only conversation we're having, we've lost, right? So we got to win the win and let us help you amplify all that good news.
Yeah, and we will definitely do it. And
all
we'll
right,
talk
Johnny.
a little bit about our manufacturing plan after we hear the great news from John.
So, as we discussed over lunch, manufacturing is in my blood. I grew up in a small tool and die shop north of Detroit, and, really believe that manufacturing can be an anchor of a community. Huge supporter of that. This is my second time at SEIA. I was at SEIA from 2010 to 2015, came back in 2018. The first time, I was really excited about going into the solar industry, working for the trade association and advocating for manufacturing. One of the first board meetings I went to, the board decided, we already have pretty sufficient investments around the world manufacturing. Maybe that's not a top policy priority. Disappointed me, but solar, huge opportunity. Was excited about that. Came back in 2018 in my new role, sat down with Abby, and she was like, what do you think about manufacturing, doing more? As we look to, a Republican administration, a Democratic administration, it seems like both of those administrations are really going to want to see more manufacturing. Again, the solar industry, prior to that, it was free trade mindset. It's all about deployment. We're not focused on where the inputs come from. Some people would even say, if other countries want to subsidize this, we should build warehouses and load it up with all this, subsidized solar panels. But we saw the trend that, and the need to really start building long-term for solar to succeed, to survive in the U.S., and being such a critical part of our economy, we really needed to have manufacturing here. Created the division, we developed a white paper, we started thinking about what would it take to really make a U.S. homegrown manufacturing base, because huge gaps in the solar supply chain right now. And we looked to state economic development. Traditionally, state economic development is the driver of manufacturing around the country. The federal government really traditionally hasn't played a role. But as we look at where other countries succeed, where even U.S. companies are building, solar companies are building factories overseas, it's twofold investments. It's investments at the state, provincial level, and the federal government level. So our analogy was as how the U.S. states compete against one another for manufacturing investments. To build manufacturing here, to pull foreign direct investment here, we needed both the federal and state working together, investing in manufacturing. And so we started through our manufacturing division, through our board, through our federal policy committee, identifying, working with companies who are either manufacturers or would be interested in manufacturing, what type of policies, what type of federal investments would incent you to build factories in the U.S. Came up with a list of 3 or 4 things. We were one of the first industries to be comfortable saying we need an industrial policy. Now that's, nobody's shy or afraid to say, hey, we need an industrial policy. It's good for our economy. It's good for our country. And you see those policies that were in SEIA's white paper that came out of that manufacturing summit in the Inflation Reduction Act. And now it just speaks for itself, right? I mean, we see publicly the literally billions of dollars of new manufacturing investments that have already been announced, but there are many more investments that are being talked about. Companies are negotiating with state economic development agencies. And so over the next couple of quarters, I think we're going to see a heck of a lot more manufacturing investments.
I think you guys even underestimate what has happened, all right? And I know you guys, when you guys are talking about from a lobbying standpoint, you're always kind of using the highest numbers. Like whatever you guys come up with, it's going to exceed that. And, to me, I'm like an amateur historian. I love history. And I just see how the United States of America, when you truly understand how it was built, and the Industrial Revolution is what made us the economic powerhouse and world power that we are today. But we have failed in the last 50 to 70 years. We have fallen behind, and we cannot continue to be an economic superpower for the next 50 years if we don't change something. And everybody has been trying to change. How do we bring jobs back to America? And I'm going to get a little dark now. All right. So how
should we take a drink?
All right. Yes. All right. Break out the Dom. Right. So how can this be unwound? One of the things that everybody loves about Congress is we can pass something for 20 years and then 6 months later it's been repealed.
Right.
All right. So how can this thing go awry with the Inflation Reduction Act?
Oh my goodness. These are the things I think about all day, every day. Welcome to my dark world. It's a good thing I'm totally optimistic generally. So first of all, thank you. I appreciate those kind words. And I would be so happy to underestimate the impact of this because I think it's going to transform our future. And, I'm looking around the room. All 4 of us have children. Like the world we are giving to our children is going to be radically different as it should be. And I'm so optimistic about that. I think a couple of things are going to happen. One, I think, obviously the House is now controlled by Republicans. They have made it very clear that investigating and having aggressive oversight is a priority. There's already been a House Committee on China formed. There have already been clear indications that they will be investigating the loan guarantee office at the Department of Energy, the way in which China plays into the solar supply chain, a number of areas. So I think we should anticipate, expect, and in some ways welcome that inquiry, right? It's coming, let's be ready for it. None of that, though, leads me to think that it's going to be overturned. One of the things, and this is why winning the win is so important, my guess is that many of those places you are going to open offices in Pennsylvania are going to be in districts that are held by Republican members of Congress. And so our job, your job and my job and our job together is to make sure that those members see the beneficial impact the IRA is having on their constituents, on their tax base, right, on the families in their communities. And so when John and I and others on the SEIA team go into offices one-on-one, nobody's really against solar, right? No one's saying this is a terrible technology. I can't believe this is happening. Almost to a person, members of Congress and state legislatures understand that a transition is underway. They want it to be fair. They want it to be sort of managed, right? Obviously, politicians don't love disruption. We can talk about disruption in a minute. But, they all know that this is where the economy is going, and they just want to make sure, things are happening in a way that feels comfortable to them. They might not always say that out in public, but they certainly say that behind closed doors. And so we got to keep our eye on the ball. We got to win the win. But I'm not as worried about things getting unraveled as I am about sort of political disaster on the China front, which will have the impact of slowing things down without having to pass any legislation. So things that undermine consumer confidence, right? That makes when someone from Freedom Forever or another company is offering this opportunity to save money, the first thought is skepticism and disbelief, not, wow, this is a great opportunity. Or when the corporates, right, who drive some of the utility scale procurement think, you know what, there's too much oversight, this is too politicized. I don't want our ESG, environment, social governance, is that what it stands for?
Yes.
ESG goals to be like criticized by our customers or by our elected. So I'm just going to pull back on my renewable procurement, right? Or utilities think, ugh, the solar stuff is too much of a pain. It's too political. It's too hard to get stuff. We're not going to do it. Like, those are the things I worry about, because those don't require an act of Congress. Those just require kind of our social license to operate, our consumer acceptance to be questioned. That's what will slow us down. And so our job is to keep putting our best foot forward, telling the story, showing the job creation, so that when the inquiries come, right, when people try to link us to sort of China, to forced labor, to unethical consumer practices, we have a really strong and positive story to tell.
And there really hasn't been an industry that I believe will be big enough to truly do that until renewable energy. Mm-hmm. And I've said this before on the podcast, I truly believe with all my heart that I've stumbled luckily into something in renewable energy, that this is the greatest wealth creation opportunity of my lifetime. This will be what oil has been for the last 75 years. And whoever can control, all right, the complete supply chain of renewable energy will be the dominant economic superpower for the next 200 years. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't happening until now. Right. Now you have us, the largest residential installer in the country. We are opening a manufacturing plant. We have to because of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that is a credit to you guys, what you guys have done. The Inflation Reduction Act, I mean, it is amazing. And I really, truly believe we have changed the course of American history if we can continue this.
All right, I think this is a good place to take a break. We're going to be filming a 2-part episode, so make sure you stay tuned for next week for part 2 with Abby Hopper, CEO of SEIA. Thanks for joining. Talk to you guys next week.